Hello, everybody. Are you ready to talk about communism? Well, I sure hope you are. Are you ready? All right. So, after that stupid little silly intro, I hope you guys are ready to talk about some communism. Last night, or maybe just a few minutes ago, you watched a video about capitalism. Now, the thing you need to remember is that capitalism is all about gaining money and accumulating wealth or capital. And you do that by ensuring that your company or your business makes the most profits that you possibly can. And so that's kind of the key to capitalism. Well, the result of that was often that the common man, the working classes, were treated really badly and really poorly. And so some people began to think that there had to be different ways to do it. Some even factory owners, a guy named Jeremy Bentham, said, you know what, there's a better way to do this. And these early guys are often called socialists. Under socialism, these early factory owners, and I can give you some more examples in class, and I can show you some more in class. These early factory owners said, you know what, we as a society should all live together. We should all benefit and we should all profit. No matter who does what, everybody gets the benefits of our labor. So there are certain jobs that, you know, everybody does, and we all sort of share the workload, but we're all going to benefit, and no one is greater than anyone else. We're all basically equal. Often the goal of this was to create what's called a utopian society. One of the authors that we talked about during the Renaissance was a guy named Thomas More. Well, Thomas More wrote a book called Utopia, in which everybody lived peacefully and everybody had, you know, made basically the same amount of money, etc. Well, during the Industrial Revolution, several socialists wanted to create a utopia, and what they would do is they would often have people live together communally as a community, and everyone would receive the same fees or the same pay. If there was pay, everyone would receive the same kind of house, the same kind of food, all of those kind of things, so that everyone was equal. Well, that was the beginning of what we're going to call a real change in an attitude toward capitalism, because what people were seeing, what society was seeing, is that the working classes, their living conditions really, really stunk. And so they wanted to change that. And so socialists, and the idea of building a socialist utopia in which all of society, everybody lives together peacefully and happily in a perfect world, and that everybody worked and everybody received basically the same thing, lived together happily. Well, there's a guy a few years later in the mid-1800s named Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a German. Karl Marx was actually a poor German who ended up living in London. And Karl Marx really radicalized and really changed the way the world saw economies. Karl Marx said that there are two basic classes in the world. They're the bourgeoisie, the urban wealthy class that own the factory, and then there are the proletariat. He called them the proletariat that does all the work. Oftentimes you'll hear these people referred to as proles. If you ever read the book 1984, they refer to the working classes, the people working in the factories, as the proles. So these are kind of your lower class citizens who really the only thing they control is their labor. And so Karl Marx said that there's a conflict, a central conflict between the wealthy, these people, and the proletariat, because the wealthy own two of the factors of production, okay, land and wealth, or land and capital. Well, in order to produce any product, you need three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. And the proletariat, the only thing that they controlled was their labor. And Marx felt that the proletariat was being taken advantage of. And he said that this accumulation of capital or wealth was bad because it really left these people out to dry, and it really harmed them, and would, in the long run, lead to some problems. And he said that eventually, and we'll look more into this tomorrow, eventually those proletariat are going to rise up, and they are going to overthrow the bourgeoisie. And those bourgeoisie are the ones who control government, they control the economy, they control all the wealth. But the proletariat are going to overthrow them to create a perfect communistic society. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow in a lot more detail, what that society looked like. But what you need to understand right now is that Karl Marx said that there was going to be a conflict. Okay? And that conflict was between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. In his book, and I'm going to write it up here, that you need to know about, was called Das Kapital. He wrote two of them, actually. One was, I'm writing it right there, Das, okay, Das, D-A-S, Cap. I really can't write, so I should really stop typing like this, shouldn't I? Well, maybe you can look at me making funny faces. Oh my goodness. See, I've got to erase it. All right, we'll get to that tomorrow. But what you need to understand is that I can't erase that. So anyway, so Das Kapital is what you need to know. And also he wrote another book with a guy named Friedrich Engel, who's not quite as important. But Friedrich Engel, and he wrote a book called The Communist Manifesto. And in it, he said that the proletariat are going to overthrow the bourgeoisie, and they're going to take control, and they're going to run and have it's called a dictatorship of the proletariat, to create a classless society in which everybody lives equally, everybody receives the same thing from society. They receive what they need to survive. Now, what that led to other variations of communism later, or socialism. Karl Marx called his ideas socialism. Okay, socialism and communism as a whole, in my personal opinion, gets a bad rap because of a misunderstanding of what it actually means. Karl Marx, this guy right here, was a very radical fellow. Okay, but he did not fully intend for the application of communism to take place as it did take place in the Soviet Union beginning in the 1920s and later on with Joseph Stalin in the 1950s. Communism gets a very bad rap, or a bad reputation, because of those guys. And rightly so. They were not very good. Stalin especially was not a very kind man. And so you need to understand that Marx's interpretation of history and Marx's interpretation of the economics was changed for that. So there are a couple of variations on socialism that we need to talk about. First of all is communism. Communism is a system of government in which the government controls land, labor, and capital, and chooses what decisions to make best. Now, the communism that we know ends up as a one-party dictatorship. And by one-party dictatorship, what I mean is that there is one political party, and if there are elections, you have to vote for the member of that communist party. So that's variation number one. The second, and we'll look at more into communism tomorrow, and I'll talk more about it tomorrow. The second variation that you need to know about is called democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is what largely exists in many Western European countries today. France is a democratic socialist state. Finland is a democratic socialist state. Parts of certain aspects of Germany are democratic socialism. See, even certain aspects of the United States government prior to the Obamacare would be considered democratic socialism. Under democratic socialism, you still have a democracy, a representative democracy in which the people vote. But in addition to that, you have certain social welfare programs that are guaranteed to every citizen. The number one thing, or the most common thing, is Social Security. Okay, that's a common socialistic idea. Public education is a socialistic idea. So under democratic socialism, the government is freely elected by the people, but it also has certain socialistic elements, including Social Security, including often, obviously, free education, and sometimes even free health care. And oftentimes in a real democratic socialist state, it's free health care. Also to note, I just said that communism, the government owns the three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. Well, in democratic socialism, the government plays more of a role, an active role in the economy, and does not completely allow free reign like we saw under Adam Smith and laissez-faire capitalism, but it does allow a certain amount of free enterprise or people's choice in capitalism. But the government often controls power production, the electricity, that's more steel production, things like that. And often oil production as well in countries that produce oil. So that's, in a nutshell, that's communism and Karl Marx, and some examples and variations on socialistic theory as proposed by Karl Marx. Bye-bye.